Hey there YouTube, this is Mr.Lubufu and welcome back to another episode of MTG Mastery. This time we're going to continue our lore series with Mercadian Masques block. Now if you haven't seen specifically the previous two episodes, they are both available as annotations right now. It is worth your time to watch them if you have not already. This is a continuation of the story and it's hard to follow if you don't know where it started. Anyway, after the epic tales of the crew of the Weatherlight and the equally entertaining tales of Urza that put the gears of this entire thing into motion, we have basically filler. Rather than commence with the epic storyline, each of the novels in this block tells a different tale, all happening concurrently as a dramatic build-up to the finale of the Weatherlight saga. Anyway, we're going to begin with the first novel, that covers, well, the Weatherlight. So the Weatherlight's troubles continue as it crash lands on a strange new plane. When most of the crew disembarks to assess the damage, the ship is promptly attacked by raiders from a tribe called the Cho-Arim, who steal the ship. Finally, soldiers from the capital city of Mercadia arrive to arrest the remaining crew. After a forced march, the crew arrives in Mercadia City, which sits atop an inverted mountain where all the important trade routes meet. This city's layout is twisted and surreal. To go left, you must turn right, then right again. Inside the city, Gerard and the remaining crew take advantage of the crowds to fight their way free. Meanwhile, Orim, who was captured with the ship, learns more about her captors. The Cho-Arim are spiritual people who suffer greatly under the greedy Mercadians. Their leader, Cho-Mano, explains that he took the Weatherlight's arrival as a sign prophesizing the return of the sky god Ramos and the end of Mercadian rule. It is believed in differing versions by all the people outside of Mercadia City that Ramos was a dragon god from another world. He battled his evil brother Orhop, and the wake of the combat left chaos and calamity. Upon seeing this, Ramos attempted to save as many people as possible from the devastation. He gathered the merfolk in the sea, the crew of a ship, and the tribesmen from the plains. Upon taking the peoples under his wing, he brought them to a new world, Mercadia. Once here, Ramos collided with something and fell from the sky. Set ablaze by the planar jump, Ramos fell into three pieces: mind, soul, and body. The Cho-Arim rode the soul into Rushwood, the Saprazans fell with the mind into the sea, and the Rashadans fell off with part of the body onto the shore. Ramos's bones crashed into the deep wood, where those unfortunate enough not to have fallen off earlier were left as zombies to guard Ramos's resting place. Now the myth itself is not far off, as Ramos was merely a dragon engine crafted by Urza to battle Mishra and save those caught in the battlefield. When the Golgothian Silex was activated by Urza, Ramos hastily gathered as many victims as he could, including a school of merfolk, soldiers from the battlefield on Argoth, and a pirate ship that was found nearby. Then the great dragon was sent to Phyrexia by the immense blast of the Silex, where he then went through a Phyrexian portal to Mercadia. Once there, he deposited the merfolk in the sea, losing his power matrix and what would become Saprazo due to a broken heart at seeing many of the refugees set aflame by the blast of the Silex. The Rashadans fell off in the shore, and the Cho-Arim in the Rushwood. After crossing through what is currently Mercadia, Ramos fell in Deepwood, where fallen ghouls were animated by his last energies. He also somehow created dryads from the trees to guard his bones, and 5 power crystals. Orim, upon hearing the tale, slowly becomes sympathetic to the Cho-Arim's situation and becomes attracted to their leader. The Weatherlight crew, meanwhile, regroups and makes contact with the rulers of Mercadia City. Mercadians are an evasive, aloof people. The nobles are hedonistic, apathetic, and lazy, while the commoners are selfish, grasping, and paranoid. Mercadian goblins are much larger and smarter than any the crew has ever encountered. They actually seem to be running the city despite their servile attitudes. Furthermore, a guild of professional assassins and thieves called the Caterans roamed the back alleys of the marketplace, ready to terrorize or murder anyone for the right price. The Mercadian magistrate unexpectedly offers Gerard an unusual deal. A platoon of soldiers and Cateran mercenaries will be placed under his command to recover the Weatherlight. If the mission is successful, Gerard may petition for both the return of his ship and safe passage out of Mercadia for himself and his crew. Suspicious of the magistrate's motives, Gerard still accepts the bargain and marches for Cho Arim territory. In the ensuing battle, the violent Caterans slaughter the Cho Arim indiscriminately. Gerard orders the Mercadian troops to stop, but he finds himself and his crew under arrest once more. Back in Mercadia City, Takara brokers a new deal with the magistrate. The crew will repair the damaged Weatherlight and restore its flying mechanisms for him in exchange for their freedom. Sisei, Hannah, and Orem will travel to Saprazo, a rival trade city inhabited by the merfolk, who can, sort of switch between fishtails and human legs at will. There they will secure an artifact required to fix the ship, while Takara and the male members of the crew remain in captivity. The magistrate agrees. Sisei, Hannah, and Orem, once arriving in Saprazo, were able to convince them to hand over their power matrix and rebel against the Mercadians. In exchange for helping the people of Mercadia to rebel against the magistrate and his forces, the crew got to use the power matrix to upgrade the Weatherlight's engine so they could leave the plane. As Gerard led several people of his group to retrieve the bones of Ramos, which were missing items from the power matrix, Takara betrays them and stole the item. She teleported back to Mercadia City, where she captured Squee, Hannah, and Karn, and revealed her true identity: Volrath. The true Takara is still imprisoned on Rath, and Volrath had been using his shape-shifting powers to deceive the crew all along. Gerard managed to free his friends and recapture Weatherlight, although Volrath escaped back to Rath. The magistrate was eventually deposed by the rebelling people of Mercadia, and the Weatherlight, with the newly acquired power matrix, plane shifted back to Dominaria. The second set of Masques block, or the second bit of lore, is set on the plane of Rath, and takes place right after the Weatherlight's escape at the end of Exodus. Urtai, the wizard adept, is left behind after opening the portal that allowed the ship to escape, and Krovax is now an evil vampiric monster. But wait, you must be asking, what happened to Miri? Last we left, she was in an epic battle with Krovax. Well, Krovax completed his transformation to the dark side and kind of murdered her. So Krovax was taken to Phyrexia, where a voice in his head was revealed to be the Dark Lord Yawgmoth. The noble was confronted by Kirill, who taught him how to consume the life force of others and transformed his body and mind into those of a Phyrexian. He was granted massively enhanced strength and endurance, glistening oil blood, the ability to manipulate Flowstorm and to teleport, and he had his sense of conscience removed. Once the completion process was finished, Krovax was taken to the stronghold and his new role was revealed. He was become the new Evansar of Rath, needing only to prove himself to his masters before he could take the throne. With Volrath mysteriously disappearing after the Weatherlight's departure, the role of Evansar was now open. Meanwhile, we step towards what is happening with Eladamri and the rest of the rebelling clans on Rath. As he spotted the Weatherlight fleeing towards the erratic portal, with the Predator in hot pursuit, Eladamri realized the day was lost and was forced to call a retreat. Upon his return to the forest, Eladamri suffered an even greater loss. His daughter, Avila, had been murdered in her sleep by a Phyrexian agent while he was away fighting. Worse still, the agent had also stolen her body for some unimaginable purpose. However, Eladamri had little time to grieve, as other news came telling him that Volrath had disappeared during the Weatherlight's attack, leaving the stronghold in chaos without a leader. Furthermore, the Predator had been crippled in battle and was having to undergo extensive repairs. Thus, despite the heavy losses the rebels had suffered, it seemed that the stronghold had lost even more and was wide open for another attack. In the stronghold, Krovax's potential competition for the Emensar status were the army commander Grevin Ilvek and the wizard Ertai. Krovax was initially unable to best Grevin in combat, but learned how to manipulate the warrior's mimetic spine to incapacitate him. Upon doing so, Krovax attempted to intimidate the Phyrexian emissary Belby into declaring him the new Evensar, but she refused. In order to prove himself, Krovax organized an expedition to attack the rebels in the Skyshroud Forest. However, the Skyshroud expeditionary force was poorly planned, low on morale, and exhausted after a forced march to the edge of the forest. As a result, they suffered heavy casualties against a much smaller rebel army and had to retreat. Eladamri was well prepared for Krovax's attack, and easily outflanked him by seizing the outermost border town, trapping Krovax's army in a pincer movement. Eladamri intended to slaughter the entire expeditionary force, but his plan was ruined by a group of elves that tried to rescue several captives Krovax was holding. The group was discovered inside the enemy camp, which forced Eladamri to engage the enemy sooner than he wanted to. This meant that more of the expeditionary force survived, including Krovax himself. The failure lost Krovax a lot of respect with the Phyrexians, especially when compared to his other rival, Ertai. The wizard had enamored Belby and also demonstrated shrewd tactical thinking in taking 6,000 members of the Kor, Vek, and Dal to prevent rebellion during Krovax's campaign, making him a credible opponent for Krovax. At this point, we kind of have perhaps the most rated R scene in Magic the Gathering history. Ertai and Belby have some wink wink nudge nudge moments going on, and it's a very steamy scene to say the least. Anyway, Krovax, to sate his bloodlust, impaled all the hostages on flowstone spikes. This horrified Belby, but was an undeniable show of his power and ruthlessness. Still, Belby refused to name him as Evensar. Despite having failed to kill Krovax, Eladamri was still at an advantage, commanding an unprecedented number of rebels. He met again with the Oracle and Vek, who declared him the true Kor Vek Dal, but warned that he would have to leave Rath for another world before becoming its savior. While Eladamri pondered the Oracle's message, word reached to him that the Predator was airborne again and would soon be fully operational. Knowing that the skyship posed a serious threat to any rebellion, Eladamri resolved to infiltrate the stronghold and destroy the vessel while it was still vulnerable. Eladamri planned to enter the stronghold by disguising several of his most loyal rebels as Ilvek and Ildal warriors, who would then take Eladamri into the fortress as their prisoner. The plan worked perfectly until Eladamri was taken to the throne room to be brought before the Phyrexian emissary, Belby. Eladamri was struck by the horror of what he saw. Belby looked identical to Avila. His daughter had not just been murdered, her corpse had been twisted into the Phyrexian pawn that stood in front of him. Eladamri immediately broke loose and wildly struck at the abomination before he was detained and taken to the dungeons for interrogation. Krovax became enraged by Belby's denial of his leadership and organized a coup against her by his corps of sergeants to force her to make him the Evensar. This was successful due to Belby's affection for Ertai, who Krovax threatened to kill unless she agreed to his demands. Belby organized a coronation ceremony for the next day, but this was interrupted by the return of Volrath. The former Evensar demanded his throne back, but was opposed by the outraged Krovax. In order to settle the dispute, Belby made the two duel for the throne. The warriors were evenly matched, but when Volrath seemed to have the upper hand, his strike against Krovax was magically diverted by Ertai, giving Krovax the opportunity to win. Krovax had been slaughtering the onlookers to restore his strength, so Ertai had seen Krovax's victory as inevitable. Ertai also knew that by aiding Krovax he would gain his favor, while Volrath would just slay the wizard immediately. With his victory over Volrath, Krovax's reign as Evansar began. Meanwhile, in prison, Eladamri underwent torture at the hands of Grevin Ilvek, but refused to reveal any information. Frustrated, Grevin withdrew, leaving Eladamri alone, as he believed the Elf Lord was unconscious. Eladamri seized his chance to break free, breaking his bonds and limping away from the dungeon. During his escape, he happened upon the cell of Takara, the daughter of Weatherlight crewman Stark, and the person that Volrath was imitating in the previous novel. He freed the emancipated girl, and together they tried to flee the stronghold. Along the way, they met up with the survivors of the failed attack on Predator and made their way to the Dream Halls, where they found themselves trapped. Their situation seemed lost as Grevin and the new Evansar Krovax began assaulting the heavily fortified chamber. However, they were surprised when Belby politely knocked on the door of the room, requesting negotiations. Strangely enough, Belby claimed that she had become opposed to the Phyrexian regime. She showed Eladamri her private portal device, which she could use to transport Eladamri and a few of his allies to the safety of another plane. Remembering the Oracle in Vex's prophecy and the Phyrexian invasion plans, Eladamri knew he had to go to Dominaria. As the stronghold forces began to break through the barricade, Takara dashed through the portal, followed at Eladamri's insistence by Lyn Civi. Eladamri himself hesitated a moment, looked back at the mockery of his daughter. He calmly took off the carved wooden vial around his neck and dashed its contents over Belby. The poison was the same as had been used to kill his daughter, having been dropped by her assassin. It quickly overpowered even Belby's robust physiology, killing her in a matter of seconds. With his daughter laid to rest, Eladamri finally fled through the portal. Krovax quickly took over Rath after being Evansar. After suppressing the rebels and without their leaders, he organized a funeral for Belby and a simultaneous execution for Volrath. He also had Urtai completed into a Phyrexian and made him his court mage. As the Rathi overlay was imminent, Krovax's main task was to prepare his armies of Rath to invade Dominaria. And that brings us to the final story of the Mercadian Masque block, which returns us to Dominaria and follows the rise and fall of Gatha, which, if you remember from Urza's block, was the rogue student. And honestly, absolutely nothing important happens. Seriously, I'll tell the tale and all, but I'm not going to go into as much detail because this story is pretty lame and doesn't have any impact at all. So during the time of Urza's bloodline experiments on Teleria, a rogue student of his named Gatha started doing his own experiments in Keld. Originally seen as weak, Gatha gained the support of the Doyen Crayhole and was able to carry out his work in peace. His experiments transformed the Keldans into nightmarish warriors, the mightiest of which was the Witch King Krieg. However, the Phyrexians eventually caught wind of Gatha's work and invaded Keld. The researcher threw himself off a cliff to prevent the Phyrexians from discovering his secrets. Inspired by his friend's heroic sacrifice, Krieg grievously injured the Phyrexian general before tossing himself off the safe cliff in defiance of his foe. The loss of Gatha and Krieg left a great power vacuum in Keld. The true-blooded Keldans regained control of the Doyen Council and made war on the Gathans. This period in Keldan history is vaguely referred as the Gathan Wars and resulted in the destruction of the Gathans. On the eve of the Phyrexian invasion of Dominaria, the Keldans launched their own invasion of Jamora. The campaign was led by the overseer Latula and the warlord Druic. Latula was seeking heroes' blood which resided in the fields of Jamora. This was needed to raise the honored dead that resided in the Keldan necropolis. The Doyen Council did not support her actions, and when Latula and her followers marched on the necropolis, Latula was defeated by Doyen Gorsha and Druic was killed. Latula and her remaining followers were banished back to Jamora, where they were eventually defeated and destroyed by the Planeswalker Teferi and Barin, the Master Wizard. as I said, you see nothing important happened. And that's going to end this episode of MTG Mastery Lore, where next time we go on to Invasion Block, which has an awesome story where we continue. This, as you notice, this block is more of a raise the tension before the climax arrives for the entire tale, and it's going to get exciting really fast. Anyway, I want to say thank you guys all for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, and be sure to check out the other episodes. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for watching this episode of MTG Mastery. If you guys are interested in any of the other videos in this series, whether it be lore, draft strategies, pack analysis, or the pack openings themselves, go ahead and click on the annotations now to be taken to playlists with the full list of all uploaded content of that type. Thank you guys all for watching. Rate, comment, and subscribe.